Come on out and support this podcast on our Patreon site. It's patreon.com/baseball talk. Now, right now, we have one very special subscriber that's sponsoring our show. He's trying to take us up to the next level, and I want to thank him very much. And I would like to invite all of our listeners to stop by and just give a little bit. Cup of coffee a month is what it takes to get our show doing much more for you on this edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show. And hello, everyone. It's time for another edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show, where we're talking about our favorite hobby, watching baseball, of course, and probably yours as well. Hello, Mr. Gary Mack.
Hello, Mr. Rich Baxter. How are you this great Mother's Day? And a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
Happy Mother's Day indeed. It's May 14th as we're doing the show, and what a great day. It's been very nice in the tri-state area, Philadelphia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and all the way up to New York City. Gary, it's been a great day. Mother's Day, as you said, just and great baseball weather too.
Yeah, based on yesterday, it didn't look like it was going to be too terrific with the rain here in the Northeast. We really got hammered a lot yesterday, and so it was nice to wake up to sunshine today, though. I do see a few clouds and, I hate to say it, some raindrops here on Long Island. So I guess we're getting a shower again.
Possibly a little rain must fall. Mayflower, something like that. April rain brings Mayflowers, but we're into May here. But yeah, Mother's Day, always a special day around the baseball diamond. And this year, Gary, they really went the extra 9 yards, and I guess they did it last year as well. It's been something that's been rolling down a hill like a snowball, gathering steam.
Yeah, Rich, the uniforms that they have been putting out lately for all of these different occasions, I have to say I'm a little pinked out, though. It's a bit much with the pink this year, and there's pink all over the place. Pink bats, pink socks, pink gloves, pink everything. So little too much pink, but of course they do it for the Mother's Day, and we're gonna see it again for Father's Day. We're gonna see it for Memorial Day, a military style uniform. So this is a way for the MLB to make money, I guess, and that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah, those uniforms, as you said, Gary, I had to take a double take last night. I didn't know they would be doing it for the 3-game series for this whole weekend, but I guess, when you order those extra uniforms and spikes and everything else to go with it, socks. But as you said, I thought they overdid it. A nice red rose emblem on their regular jerseys, I think would work much better. Less distracting and just, more of a tribute, just having a bunch of baseball players run around in pink garments. I'm sorry, mothers. I love you. I think you're the best, but baseball, come on.
Yeah, and even the catchers are getting into it with pink catching gear. I mean, boy, that was so distracting last night. The catchers watching the Brewers Mets games, of course, and the Brewers catcher was like all in pink. The Mets catcher had his regular stuff on. The catcher today for the Mets, though, has gray with pink highlights to it, and even the umpires have pink. The behind the plate, the mask has got pink cushions around it, so a bit much. And
I was watching a game last night, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what are we going to see next? A pitcher come out with like a handbag over his shoulder or something here? I mean,
they will do the same for Father's Day. They'll wear, I think I haven't seen the hats yet this year, but there'll be, I guess, a blue theme, maybe a gray and a blue. I do like the gray hats, but uh, the pink is a little much for me. And they'll be wearing green on Memorial Day, green hats, and with, I think, a camouflage brim. Uh,
Mm.
I mean, I get it, but sometimes it's a bit much.
Yeah, I think, like I was saying, a nice red rose embroidery, a nice sized one as well would be a whole lot better. Possibly for Father's Day, maybe even a mustache emblem or something like that. Just something classy, but as you said, it's a way for them to, I guess, auction some of these things off somewhere in somebody's collection. They're going to have a nice pink uniform or two. So, baseball having a bit of fun with it. And um, what can you do? It's the 2017, and this is the way the world we live in does things.
And and they'll sell hats.
Yep.
We'll buy these hats. They have the All-Star game. They have a hat for the All-Star game, a home run derby hat for the All-Star game, and then they wear their regular hats anyway, I think, or maybe they changed that. I don't know, but it's all about money, making more money, and marketing more equipment and hats and stuff like that.
That's what it is. So, well, we hope you guys out there that listen to this show liked our last edition. It was a special edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show. We didn't talk any news, so we've got a ton of news to catch up on, some of which is very interesting as well. And we hope you liked that show. We didn't get much feedback on the Leo DeRocher special, so we hope you enjoyed that interview with Paul Dixon. We're going to try to plan some more as the season goes on. Going to pick some big names in baseball. And Gary, another big name who hung up his spikes last year or so, getting his day in the Bronx today.
Yeah, Derek Jeter is going to have his number retired and have his plaque, I guess, unveiled in Monument Park. If there's any more room, I guess they'll squeeze him in somewhere. It's getting pretty crowded now in the Yankees Monument Park there with all the Yankees, and of course the numbers. They're virtually out of single digit numbers. I think one is maybe still available. Two will be retired. 3, 4, 5, of course, is retired. 6, I believe, is retired. 7 and 8 are definitely retired. 9, I'm not sure about, and that's it.
Yeah, no single digit numbers for the Yankees. And that's kind of odd when you think about it. A baseball team, they've been in business for quite a long time. I did read an article just today, this afternoon. I came upon one that was in the New York Times yesterday, actually. And they spoke of one single digit number that is still available for the Yankees. And of course, that would be 0. So, not too many people like to wear the number 0 for obvious reasons. But the general manager, Brian Cashman, was asked about it. He said he would have no problem giving it out if it was to the right player. I assume somebody that might somewhere down the line get his number retired as well. And then, of course, the Yankees would have no single digits left. But, what does that mean for generations of Yankee fans to come? They're not going to see a number 3. And I love Babe Ruth, but after a certain number of years, I think maybe they should put the uniform back into use, maybe 20 years, or put a time limit on it, 10 years, 25 years, pick a number. But I think you have to reintroduce that number at some point, especially with a team like the Yankees.
I don't know. That's it's a point, but they've had such legendary players there, especially 3, 4, and 5. Perhaps they shouldn't have retired as many numbers as they have had. But it's hard to argue with 3, 4, and 5, and even 7, Mickey Mantle, 8, Yogi Berra, and Bill Dickey. tough to argue with that. But I don't know. Maybe they'll just have to have a 3A or something.
Yeah, you let a couple generations go by. That's why I come up with a 20-year mark, maybe, and then you could just make it the player's name with a nice number right next to it, Babe Ruth 3. But you reintroduce the number, you give somebody else a chance to wear it. I just, I'm a Phillies fan first and foremost, but if they had every single digit number retired, I don't know how I'd feel about that.
Well, they were the first to introduce numbers, so I guess they can be the first to not have any single digits as well. And by the way, here's a little bit of trivia. Do you know how Babe Ruth got the number 3?
Have no idea.
Babe Ruth got the number 3, and Garrett got the number 4 because that's where they hit in the batting order. And
Well,
is to make it easier, they just gave those numbers out that way. And another bit of Babe Ruth trivia is that he never wore the NY on his chest when he played with the Yankees. Never wore the NY. The only uniform he wore with the NY was on Babe Ruth Day, which was a couple of months before or a month and a half or so before he passed away. But he never wore the NY on his chest at all. He wore uniforms that said Yankees on it, which I think were mostly road uniforms and New York. But the home uniforms had the infamous NY, interlocking NY on the front. So there's a little bit of trivia for you.
very interesting. And I know Babe Ruth is somebody that we're trying to get together a special program on. So if you kind of like the Leo DeRocher format that we did last show, please give us an email. Give us some encouragement that few people out there actually liked it. I know we had a lot of listens on it. We'd be interested to hear your comments on it. But somebody that won't be in the Bronx to honor Derek Jeter tonight, Gary, is A-Rod. And curiously, he's going to be absent from this retirement party, so to speak, ceremony of the number. And it's very interesting that he would sit out on this one.
Maybe he's just keeping a low profile. Maybe he figures it's Derek Jeter's night. But it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it because they got dealt a bit of a blow yesterday with the weather. They got rained out, so today's a double header. They started at 2, I believe, and it's supposed to be between the games, the whole ceremony and everything. But now, if it's raining again, who knows if they ever get a rain delay or something. It's not going as planned for Derek Jeter Day, but and you can argue whether he deserves a day. Let's just say this: he deserves a day. They've already anointed him to go into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. As a Met fan, I never liked the guy, but I did respect him as a baseball fan. And it's a funny thing with Jeter. He came around at the right time, got to play on some winning teams. And when you say a great player, was he a great player? I don't know if he was a great player, but I'll tell you, I never saw anybody more clutch player than him. Never wanted him up in a tight situation because he always found the way to get on base, be it a base hit, a walk, whatever, and the leadership quality. And I think that's a lot that's going to push him in to the Hall of Fame. And he's as deserved as anybody else.
Yeah, he reminds me a whole lot of Cal Ripken, that strong guy that was always playing. He put in a 20-year career. Maybe his batting wasn't quite there. I was just looking at his numbers in Baseball Reference. His batting is not up to the criteria, so to speak, quote unquote, of a Hall of Fame player. Everything else is the measurement stats of a Hall of Fame player. They call it Hall of Fame monitor. A likely Hall of Famer is at 100. He was at 337. Um, and there's actually two batting type of statistics that they give, black ink and gray ink. Now, the gray ink had him right at around the average Hall of Famer, but the black ink had him quite a bit below an average Hall of Famer. But I think there's no doubt that he's headed there.
And I think it was again. I think it was that he came around at the right time. It all came together with the Yankees at that particular time, and he was the captain. He was the leader, and really kept those guys in line and did a fine job that way. And and again, he was clutch. I mean, he was a clutch, and he played a tough position. Shortstop is a tough position to play, and he played it for 20 some odd years, as you said, and never really was hurt much.
Yeah, he sort of had that Iron Man type of characteristic to him. Very much like Cal Ripken as well in his build. He was, wiry, thin. Um, Ripken was at third. What a great combination that would be. Jeter at short and Ripken at third. Wow.
Yeah.
But getting back to that feud with A Rod and Jeter, there was an interview done just a couple of days ago, this past week, leading up to the retirement ceremony today at Yankee Stadium. And they described it as very awkward. I'm going to try to put some of it on the air if I can cue it up here. But let's see if we can get a listen to it here real quick. So there's a little bit of that interview. They described it as awkward. It went on for several more minutes, but assumably there was a few more jabs back and forth. But that's what happens on live television sometimes. And that was a CNBC interview, Gary, a business channel doing that. And we could hear the party going on in the back room there. Actually, it was a business office. So all these great Yankees were in there and they tried to do this interview. Maybe it wasn't the greatest of settings.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't really get to hear it, Rich, so it didn't come through on my end, but I hope it went out to the people. But yeah, it's there's got to be some hard feelings there. They said that the Jeter wasn't real happy with it, and maybe that's why A Rod's not going to be involved in this thing. Maybe he just figured he'll just keep his distance and let Jeter have his day. He doesn't want to get involved in it.
So very interesting there between the two superstars of the Yankees. Um, but Derek Jeter getting his retirement day is going to be in Monument Park, assumably forever from this point on. Congratulations, Derek Jeter.
Yes, sir. Without a doubt. If anybody deserves it, I guess he does.
Well, we had a whole ton of other stories going on within the baseball world in the last week or so when we did our special. Gary, what else do we have on this week's show?
Well, Rich, we got lots of other stuff, but one thing that I saw this week was keeping in my Hall of Fame mode, there was an article written on a cheat sheet. I've been unable to find it again, but I saw it yesterday, and it was essentially about this writer's opinion of 5 Hall of Famers that shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to try to remember them. One was Phil Rizzuto. Jim Rice was another. Bruce Sutter. The other two are a fleeting question to me now. And I guess the thing that really got to me about it is the sabermetrics coming in again and involved there and showing, oh, this guy's war wasn't any good, and this guy's war wasn't any good, and blah blah blah. Well, you know, I'm beginning to get the feeling that sabermetrics is going to be the thing that ruins this game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was listening to an interview today on the baseballtalkradio.com network on a book that we both received. We're doing a review of it as we speak. Keith Law's book on stats and how they're used in baseball today and how it's, quote unquote, to him, transformed the game. Very interesting. I think our listeners know where we stand on that. If they've listened for past 6 shows or a couple years, however long they've listened, they know that we're not big favorites of these sabermetric stats. And how you can say that about a baseball Hall of Famer and go back and start reviewing their career with these crazy harebrained stats, in my opinion, is just a waste of time. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be a part of baseball for the next several years, if not longer, as it seems like the game is trying to become too mechanical. It seems like certain forces are trying to take humans out of the baseball game. We have instant replay. We have, frame by frame analysis of a catch at first base, a total waste of time, in my opinion. But we also have these sabermetric stats, and they're just trying to turn the human being, I think, into like something it isn't.
And can somebody tell me what is the value of exit velocity?
Nothing, in my opinion. I think it's about as valuable as discovering why a fly flew around a pitcher's head or
Yeah.
a batter's head while he's swinging.
I mean, swing speed, if they could do swing speed, that would make more point to me than exit velocity. Oh, the bat ball comes off his bat fast. Yeah, I can tell that by watching. The ball's flying out. By the way, talking about flying out, the Mets just blew an 8-run lead and are now losing a game that they were winning 7-1. So it looks like they're going to get swept, but that's another day, another thing. But again, this article going back now, I can agree with one or two of the guys. I agreed with Jim Rice. I don't think Jim Rice was ever a Hall of Famer. I wish I could remember the other two guys, but Phil Rizzuto, even Ted Williams said that the only difference between those great Yankee teams of the 50s, the early 50s, late 40s, and on in the 50s was Phil Rizzuto. That was if the Red Sox had Rizzuto, they would have been winning all those championships. And look, if Ted Williams is going to say that, I gotta believe Ted Williams. Plus, the guy who was an announcer for 50 years. There was another article that said about Ralph Kiner. Well, all Ralph Kiner did was lead the National League in home runs, I think 10 years or 8 out of 10 years. Okay, he had a short career because he hurt his back. But, 8 out of 10 years, let's see somebody do that nowadays. And plus, he was 50 years announcer. So, is Bob Uecker deserving of it? Of course he is. He was there for how many years? The ambassadors that he did, the ship he did for baseball. Another guy that this author mentioned was Bruce Sutter. Well, Bruce Sutter is a good argument because Lee Smith is not in, and Lee Smith had, I think, 100 more saves than Bruce Sutter. The difference is Bruce Sutter came in and developed essentially or used that split finger fastball for the first time and had a ton of saves and won one or two world championships. And that's the difference between him and Lee Smith. Lee Smith never performed in a big game. I don't know. It's all, you can argue till the cows come home about who should be in and who shouldn't be in. And I'm sure there are guys there that shouldn't be in. But if you start taking these sabermetrics for everybody in the Hall of Fame, you'd probably empty it. We'd be left with maybe Ruth Cobb and Christy Mathewson and Hannes Wagner and and that might be it. So it's not all about the stats. And these guys have got to get over that because they're going to ruin the game. I still want to know, is there any team that was selected completely by sabermetrics that's won a World Series?
Exactly. And I think that, a lot of these sabermetric stats are nice to look at and things like that. But as far as overanalyzing, I think you could really get into that very quickly with sabermetrics. And as you said, exit velocities, trajectories of home runs, how high a ball went. Do I really care? Can we go back and see Willie Stargell's home runs, and can they run the StatCast towards that? I mean, who really cares? It went into the upper deck. He hit a moonshot, they used to call him. So why do we have to have these goofy numbers displayed on screens and things like that? So,
well, I think that's for the kids to keep them busy and stuff when they're watching a game on television. I think that's what that whole thing is all about, with the goofy numbers and the exit velocities and all that speedy stuff. You watch a game on ESPN, you can barely see the game with all the stuff they got. They got stuff on the top of the screen with the score and all of that. They got stuff on the right. Then they got that strike cast thing or whatever they call it with the box on the thing there, on the catcher. I mean, there's just crap all over the screen when you watch a game. Now, of course, their announcing crew is unlistenable, so I guess they have all that stuff around so you can turn off the volume and still know what's going on in the game. But it's just a lot of nonsense, I think.
Yes, it is. Well, let's take a little break in the podcast here. You're listening to the Baseball Talk Radio Show with the great Gary Mack, and I'm Rich Baxter. We'll be right back after these words from some friends. Do you hear that, Gary?
No, I'm not.
Okay, we'll have to just actually edit that in. So if you're watching the YouTube show, I apologize for the audio difficulties we have tonight. Obviously, something changed in my mixing deck, but we'll have to add that in. All right, well, we're back talking live baseball here on the Baseball Talk Radio Show with Gary Mack and Rich Baxter. And Gary, we talked a little bit about how certain teams are doing so far. You mentioned your Mets with a tough end to today's game, but isn't that what we love about baseball? You could be down by 9 runs and then have a half inning left, maybe even 1 out left, and come back and win a ball game.
No, I hate that.
Well, we would have loved it if it was our team.
Well, yes, that's a different story. And your team did that today. They came from behind and won, I believe.
Okay, but somewhere Mr. Brewtown is just wringing his hands together right now.
He's very ecstatic. And I'll tell you one thing, that team can hit. I don't know, Rich. It's just it's really a shame, the injuries all across baseball. We give the standings and we talk about the different teams we're surprised in, and Seattle was a team in the American League West that everybody a lot of people had picked to be a contender, and they've just been decimated with injuries. A lot like the Mets, and that's not an excuse. That's a fact. There's too many injuries in this game today, and we've said it how many times, and I'll repeat it again. I think these guys are in too good a shape. I really believe that wholeheartedly. When I hear all of these injuries with the pulled muscles and the torn muscles, because it's not, it's not like they got hit by a pitch. It's not that they run into the wall and get a concussion. It's just, I don't want to call it silly, but it's silly. It's silly stuff. I mean, I give you an example, and I hate to bring the Mets up as an example all the time, but Noah Syndergaard gained 17 pounds of muscle over the winter and did not throw that much. Well, how is that muscle going to know what to do if he's not throwing the ball? He's just putting on 17 pounds. Yeah, he looks like Adonis, but the muscles used to going like this the first time he throws the ball. It's oh, what the hell do I do now?
Gonna snap like a piece of chicken off Colonel Sanders' drumstick.
That's right. And I think that is a lot of the problem. He tore his lat muscle because the muscle wasn't used to doing what he had to do. And he got a blister in one game, and that could throw off your mechanics. Then his bicep would bother him. That can throw off your mechanics, and that's all you have to do. And your muscles are all screwed up. And yeah, great. You look terrific. You look like Thor, but you're pitching like Bugs Bunny in that thing where he gets hit all over the place. So I really think it goes back to being in too good a shape. And Seattle, the whole pitching staff, I think, has been DL'd. So, I mean, they have lost their whole pitching staff that they started with the season, including King Felix, who's on the DL. And, Major League Baseball's got to look into this. I mean, they got to have these guys doing yoga or Pilates or something to stretch these muscles. But every team has got to look. And the Mets have got to look. Everybody's quick to blame here in New York. They're quick to blame the doctors and the training staff. The training staff didn't want Syndergaard putting on 17 pounds of muscle. They were not happy about that, the Mets. And again, that's an example because that's what I deal with. I'm exposed to the Mets, but and I don't think these guys throw enough. And when I say throw enough, I mean light toss. I mean long toss. I'm not talking about doing a bullpen session and trying to hit 95 miles per hour. That's the worst thing you can do. They should be out every day, long tossing the ball and running sprints. Running and long tossing. Never mind the freaking gym. Long toss the ball. It stretches the muscles out, gets your arm into the position, and stretches it and makes it longer and makes it stronger.
Very good advice there. And we're going to take a look at the ESPN standings here. American League East, the Yankees have regained control in the last week or so, and they've really did a great turnaround. They're leading as of the time we're doing the podcast here. They have 22 wins and 12 losses, followed close behind by the Baltimore Orioles, who had been on top for many weeks. They're 22 and 13, just slipping a little bit. They've lost 3 in a row going into today's play on Mother's Day. Over in the Central, it's the Minnesota Twins. Surprise, surprise. And then they're joined almost by the Cleveland Indians, who've really turned it around in the last week. They've climbed up into second place. And out west, Gary, it's the Houston Astros, 25 and 12, playing like a lot of people thought they would last year. All of a sudden, they've put some puzzle pieces together down there in Houston, doing very well down there in the state of Texas. Right behind them, another Texas team, the Texas Rangers, are 18 and 20. They're significantly far behind them, though. They're 7.5 games out of first place already.
But Texas is starting to put it together a little bit now. So that Houston team is good, Rich. They are a good team.
Yeah, they become the best team in Major League Baseball. We'll jump over to the National League. The Washington Nationals, your previous best team in baseball, still up there, 23-13. As we're doing the podcast, as Gary said, the Phillies beat them. Miracle game today. They came back and stormed back for a victory. The Nats could have been 24 game winners, but there is a double header there today as well. So the Phils and the Nats are squaring off on a rain out day night double header there in Washington. Gary, your New York Mets right behind, trailing, but keeping a nice little pace there, 16-19. Been on a slide.
Well,
Lost
16-20 because they lost today.
16-20 yet hasn't been updated yet on my screen here, but they're still up there. They're still within striking range.
Yes, they are. But I have to say that they right now they're missing the best pitcher, the best hitter, and their best relief pitcher. And the best pitcher is going to be out until probably August or September. And the same thing with the relief pitcher, if he comes back at all this year. Had an arterial clot, a blood clot in his shoulder that was operated on immediately. So he's gone. And I have to tell you right now, the bullpen is in shambles.
Yeah, the fortunes have changed very drastically and to the negative for the New York Mets. Feel bad for them. Jumping over to the Central, it's the Cardinals. They've suddenly rose up to the top there, 21-15. Again, as of the latest update that I have on my screen, winners of their last two. They're 8-2 in their last 10. The Brewers playing quite well lately. They've leaped back up in the second place, and surprise, 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 the Cubs trailing the field almost near last place, and that's kind of hard to believe.
It's the World Series hangover, I think, Rich. Everybody was picking them because they were so dominant again, and didn't think they were going to repeat because everybody's gunning for them. And let's face it, a lot of stuff came together for them last year as far as the pitching staff goes. Now, their pitching staff is not really that good with Lester and Arrieta, but last year Arrieta had a career year. Lester had a decent year. Can't remember the third guy.
Kendrick.
Kendrick had a sensational year, and but now they're all coming back down to earth this year. Arrieta is struggling. Kendrick is not pitching extremely well. I think Lester's having another Lester type of year, and they are struggling, and they're not even at 500. So the Cubbies came back down to earth, and I think everything went right for them last year. Everything clicked. And this year it's not. And sometimes it's that hangover. They call it the World Series hangover. And it's one of the reasons that they said that San Francisco won every even year, because they'd win and have that hangover and come back again the following year and win and then have the hangover again. So we'll see with the Cubs if they can put it together. But right now they're off to a not audacious start, I should say.
Yeah, very puzzling, but maybe they're getting full of themselves too. They're believing the hype, so to speak, thinking they're better than they actually are, that kind of thing. And I'm not writing them off yet, but I think they have to get their feet back on the ground, know that they're baseball players and not automatic favorites to go back to the World Series, obviously. And they also traded a guy that's from the South Jersey area, one of the better, I would say the top two ball players to come out of South Jersey. Of course, Mike Trout would be number one, but Matt Caesar, I believe is the way he pronounces his name, was let go by the Cubs during the time we were off from the podcast. And he is a guy that you didn't hear about every day with the Cubs, but he was a good bench guy. He was a good off the bench guy that sort of told these guys, hey, here's a guy, he's struggling. He was all South Jersey when he went into the league. He can play baseball, but he was a guy that could be put into the puzzle at any position in the outfield for the Cubs. Now all of a sudden they made a decision that they got rid of him. They sent him on his way. San Diego Padres picked him up, and I just think you need to remember that name, Matt Seizure. I think he's going to really do well with another team.
Well, let's hope he does, and um, throws it back at the Cubbies' faces, I guess, if you will. And speaking of San Diego and the West Division, look at those Colorado Rockies. They're hanging in there so far, and playing good. Actually, playing better on the road than they are at home. 12-10 at home, 11-5 on the road. So good for them. Don't know much about them. Haven't seen anything, so I can't really say other than Cargo and the Arenado. Correct me, whatever. Arenado, the third baseman.
Mm-hmm.
But they're hanging in there, and the Dodgers are closing the gap again. They're a half game, followed by Arizona, who's 2 games out. And then comes the lowly Padres and the lowly Giants this year, and they're just a bad team, Rich.
Yep, I guess you could call them bringing up the rear down there in San Francisco, so to speak. Let's go over the top 5 power rankings in baseball as of ESPN's listing here. Washington Nationals, number 1. The Yankees at number 2. The Houston Astros, number 3. I guess you could say maybe they're going to move up on that list for next week. Number 4, the Cubs. This is the most puzzling thing about ESPN. They still have the Cubs at number 4 in the power rankings.
Well, I guess according to the stats, they should be there, but there we go with the sabermetrics again. The pitching is probably what's killing them.
So it'll be interesting to see next week for next week's show how they perform in the top 10 or so in the ESPN power rankings. And rounding out the 5th spot, not surprisingly, the Baltimore Orioles. They've been doing much better than they had been forecasted to do this year. And guess what? The Cleveland Indians right behind them. And I think they've found something all of a sudden, the Indians here in the middle of May. And we'll be dealing with them for the rest of the season as well.
Well, they made it to the World Series last year. They were determined to get back this year. They got, I think, one of the best managers in baseball, and they got a good, solid team. And they should have won that World Series last year. I mean, they were up 3-1, I think it was, and just ran out of pitching, I think. That was the whole thing. They had a couple of guys hurt. And it's all about that pitching.
Yes, it is. Well, I want to remind our listeners, if you'd like to hear our specials, please send us an email. Give us some names on guys that you'd like us to feature coming up. We have a few in mind, obviously, as the season wears on here. We're going to be producing some more of those shows. So give us your feedback. And Gary, it was a great show this week. I can't wait for the next show already.
Yeah, Rich, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more stuff to talk about and a lot more action. Let's hope we're talking more positive about our own teams.
Yes, indeed. Well, we hope you liked this edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show, and we'll talk to you again on the next edition. Thanks for listening.